Before most people forget names, places, or faces, they lose control of something else, their feelings, and not in a way that makes sense. We call them phantom emotions, sudden, irrational bursts of anger, joy, sadness, or detachment that don't match the moment at all. Neurology studies now confirm emotional instability often shows up 5 to 10 years before cognitive decline is even measurable. That means if you're seeing someone close to you cry, snap, or laugh in strange ways, it may be time to listen a little closer. Let me walk you through the most common emotional red flags, not as a list, but as real stories of real people, just like those in your own life. I'm Dr. Late Life, and I've spent over 2 decades studying how the human brain ages. What I'm about to share could help you recognize one of the most overlooked, most misunderstood early signs of dementia. No memory loss, no confusion, not yet. It often starts with emotion. 1. Frank had always been calm, the kind of man who never raised his voice. But one day, in a grocery store, he screamed at a cashier for giving him the wrong receipt. His wife thought it was a bad day, but it kept happening. He snapped at the neighbors, yelled at the TV, muttered when traffic slowed. Whether he was rested or tired didn't matter. The rage would just appear. 2.5 years later, Frank was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Doctors now know that outbursts triggered by small inconveniences are often one of the very first warning signs of neurodegeneration, especially in Alzheimer's and frontotemporal dementia. It's not just a bad temper, it's a neurological breakdown in disguise. 2. James was 69 when he started crying while folding laundry. No one had died. Nothing had gone wrong. He just felt overwhelmed. The tears came again while watching a commercial, once even while reading a birthday card. His wife thought it was stress, but the crying kept coming. Without sadness, without warning, and eventually without control. Years later, James was diagnosed with vascular dementia. Doctors traced his symptoms to limbic system dysfunction, where the brain's emotional wiring starts to misfire, releasing emotional responses without cause. The body cries, but the heart doesn't know why. 3. At her sister's funeral, Martha, age 78, started giggling. It wasn't nerves. She laughed again when her husband fell, again when a neighbor had a heart attack. Then came the clapping at tragic news stories, the smiling at family arguments. Her daughter was horrified. Eventually, Martha was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, the type that attacks the brain's empathy and social awareness. Without those emotional filters, the brain can confuse sadness with joy, seriousness with silliness. It's not cruelty. It's misfiring neurons turning tragedy into comedy without the person even realizing it. 4. When Clara's best friend passed away, she didn't cry. She didn't go to the funeral. She just shrugged and said, "Well, that's life," and went back to watching TV. Birthdays came and went. Even her own cancer diagnosis barely registered a reaction. When her great-grandson was born, she said nothing. 3.5 years later, Clara was diagnosed with a behavioral variant of frontotemporal dementia. The research is clear. When someone becomes emotionally flat during major life events, it's often a sign of early damage to the orbital frontal cortex, the area of the brain that connects us to what matters. This isn't strength. It's the absence of feeling. Not because they don't care, but because their brain has stopped letting them. 5. Dennis, 75, stood up in a restaurant and shouted, "What a wonderful day." People clapped. His wife laughed awkwardly, but then it happened again. At the hospital, at a cemetery, on the sidewalk. Soon he was hugging strangers, singing in the street, and planning random celebrations just because. Over the next 3 years, his joy became louder and less appropriate. Then came the diagnosis, frontotemporal dementia. Neurologists now believe excessive euphoria in inappropriate situations is a result of dopamine imbalance and frontal lobe damage. It's not joy. It's the pleasure circuits malfunctioning, flooding the brain with emotion even when it doesn't make sense. 6. Alan had always had a sharp wit. But after retirement, his jokes got mean. "You finally did something right," he told his wife at dinner, in front of their guests. The teasing became jabs. The humor became hurtful. Eventually, the laughter stopped, and the tension remained. Alan was diagnosed with mixed dementia 5 years later. Studies show that early-stage dementia can cause loss of empathy and inhibition, turning casual sarcasm into cutting cruelty, without the person realizing they've gone too far. It's not just a darker sense of humor. It's the brain slowly forgetting how to care. 7. Lorraine, 66, fell into sobs when her favorite purse went out of stock. She screamed in a restaurant when they ran out of shrimp. She once cried for an hour after losing her keys. These weren't tantrums. They were breakdowns. 4 years later, she was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. Experts found that this kind of emotional overreaction to small setbacks points to early failure in the brain's executive function systems. When the brain can't gauge proportion, a small inconvenience feels like a tragedy. 8. She started checking his phone, watching him constantly, whispering that they were watching her too. 2 years later, Helen was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. Doctors linked her paranoia to temporal and parietal lobe deterioration, where the brain starts inventing threats that don't exist. This isn't jealousy. It's a brain confused by its own memories, emotions, and fears. 9. Betty, 77, never used bad language until she started cursing at her grandkids, at strangers, even during church. One day, she screamed at her teapot. Her family thought it was medication. But 2 years later, she was diagnosed with behavioral variant frontotemporal dementia. What she was experiencing is called coprolalia, the sudden eruption of obscene words caused by damage to the brain's language and inhibition centers. The person doesn't always remember it. Often, they don't even realize they said anything wrong. The brain breaks before the memory fades. When we think of dementia, we think of forgetting. But long before the memory goes, the feelings start to change. These emotional misfires, rage, laughter, paranoia, silence, they don't come from nowhere. They come from a brain in trouble, and if we recognize them early, we can act before more is lost. If you found this video helpful, I invite you to do 3 simple things. Click like so this message reaches more families like yours. Subscribe to this channel to stay ahead of brain health, aging, and how to care for those we love. And if someone close to you is showing strange emotional signs, share this video with them. Because sometimes one small awareness can change everything. I'm Dr. Latelife, here to help you understand your brain, preserve your memory, and live the later years of life with dignity and clarity. See you in the next video.